Today we're going to talk about two triangle congruence rules, and that means that these are two of the rules that help you determine if two triangles are congruent, meaning the same shape and the same size. Our first rule we're going to talk about is side angle side. We shorten it and say SAS, and this is a rule that tells you that if we know that a side, an angle, and a side in that order are congruent on two triangles, then we know that these two triangles are congruent. Okay, it's a neat little rule because you don't need to know all of the information. You don't need to know all three angles and all three sides. All you need is a side, an angle, and a side that are next to each other in order to determine that they are congruent. So when I look at this and I look at my triangle and you think about it in a clockwise fashion, I'm going to look at a side. I'm going to have a side here. I'm going to mark it in a different color. I've got my side is congruent on both of these triangles. All right, I know that my angles are congruent on both of these triangles, and I know a second side is congruent. So when I look at my labelings, I've got SAS. So that means side, angle, side for that set of triangles. A different rule is side, side, side. So that occurs when we know all three sides of a triangle are congruent, then we know that the triangle themselves are congruent. So I've got two sides marked as congruent. I've got another pair of two sides marked as congruent, and I have a third pair of sides marked as congruent. So that means these two triangles are congruent, not just the sides of the triangles. We know the angles also have to be the same in order for this to be true. All right, so today we are going to work on proving triangles are congruent by either one of these rules. All right, let's look at number one. The instructions for this problem say, would you use side, side, side or side, angle, side to prove the triangles are congruent? If there's not enough information to prove the triangle congruent by side, side, side or side, angle, side, then we're going to write not enough information. So looking at number one, we're going to label what we know. Okay, so we know that these two sides are congruent, and we know that because they have the same number of tick marks. We know that these two angles are congruent because they have the same number of arcs. And then finally, we know that the sides are congruent because they have the same number of tick marks. And when I look at this and I kind of go around my triangle and I write the letters in order, I'm going to write an S, A, S. So that means that my triangle congruence rule for this set of triangles is SAS or side, angle, side. Looking at number two, labeling, I've got two sides that are congruent. I have another pair of sides that are congruent and a third pair of sides that are congruent. All right, and when I go around my circle here, it says side, side, side. So my angle congruence, my triangle congruence rule is SSS. Okay, let's do one more example on the front here, number three. When I look at number three, I have a side that is congruent, and I have an angle that is congruent. It might initially look like we don't have enough information, but let's investigate further because we also have this side here that is shared. So in order for it to be shared, it has to be the same. So I'm going to put a little S here to show that I do in fact have two sides and an angle. Now, we do need to be careful because remember we go around the triangle to determine if it works. And when I go around this triangle, it says ASS or SSA, okay? It's not in the correct order, okay? This is not allowed, okay? For a couple reasons, right? So this is not allowed, meaning it was not side, angle, side. It was angle, side, side. Okay, that angle isn't between those two sides, which means it does not work. So this is not enough information. Okay, in case you didn't hear that, this is not enough information because the angle needs to be between the two sides. The sides cannot be next to each other. On number 9, it says state what additional information is required in order to prove the triangles are congruent by side, side, side. So in number 9, we are looking for three sides. Notice that they only give us two sides. We have this side is congruent and this side is congruent. So we need a third side. So what are the sides that we need? Specifically, we need side DF. Remember, our line segment is named by the endpoints, so DF. So I'm going to write the letters DF with a little line on top of it to say it's a line segment. And then I'm going to use the congruence symbol, which is an equal sign with a little squiggly on top. And we know DF has to be congruent to this side, JL. Okay, and that is the information that we need to prove that these two triangles are congruent by side, side, side. Let's look at number 11. Same question, only now we're talking about side, angle, side. So it looks like they have given us one side and an angle. Okay, but side, angle, side needs another side. And specifically, we need the side that is on the other side of the angle. Okay, so we have a side and an angle. We need the side next to it, which is MN. And then on the other triangle, we have a side and an angle. We need the other side, which is RS. So let's write that like a congruent statement. I'm going to say side MN is congruent to side RS. Number 13 says complete each proof. A proof is an explanation of why this is true. So they gave us that side AB and DE are congruent. We know that by the picture and in our statement up top. We also know that BC is congruent to EC and that C is the midpoint of AD. And they want us to use all of this information and explain how we know that these two triangles are congruent. They have started the explanation below. We just need to fill in the blanks. All right, so our explanation says C is the midpoint of AD. So C is perfectly in the middle between these 2 points. All right, so that means that AC, that side is congruent to CD. If it's perfectly in the middle, then you know the two sides are going to be equal. And then it continues to say that. It says because a midpoint divides a segment into two congruent segments. So finishing out our explanation, the other two pairs of sides are given as congruent. They told us in our picture and in our explanation at the beginning. So we know triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEC by which rule? Well, we know side, side, and then another side. So SSS. Let's look at number 14. Number 14 says that our given is AD is congruent to CD. So AD, this side length, is congruent to CD, the other side length. And we also know that angle ADB is congruent to CDB. So that's ADB is congruent to CDB. And this is also noted in our picture with our symbols. They want us to prove that these two triangles are congruent. So let's look at our explanation down below, and we're going to work on filling in these blanks. We know that side AD is congruent to CD and angle ADB is congruent to CDB. That was in the given. All right. Now we also know that BD is congruent to itself, right? This is the shared side, and shared sides are congruent. This is also true by what we call the reflexive property. That means that something is congruent to itself. So therefore, we know if we know this side, and we know an angle and another side. So that is by the rule side angle side, or SAS, that these two triangles are congruent.